Good evening. It is 6:30, April 10th, 2019, and the meeting of the Urban Design Commission will now come to order. May we have a roll call?
Nicole Ream.
Here.
Monica Sullivan.
Here.
Jerry Winchester.
Here.
Melissa Morse.
Here.
Edith McKee.
Here.
Carla Baxley. Here. Art Clark.
Here.
Barbara Cash is excused. Thank you.
Moving on to meeting minutes. We have minutes from Wednesday, March 13th, 2019. May we have a motion to approve the minutes? I have a motion from Commissioner Winchester and a second from Commissioner Clark. Are there any objections to the minutes being approved? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. All right, moving on to special order of business. Are there any disclosures? Commissioner Morse.
Thank you, Chair. I was absent for the last meeting, so I asked to be recused from the resolutions. Okay, never mind.
Okay. Are there any other disclosures? Okay. Moving on to item 2 for special order of business. We are up for our annual election of officers. Can we get a motion on the floor to retain the officer positions we have currently? We have a motion from Commissioner Morse and a second from Commissioner Clark. Commissioner Morse, would you speak to your motion?
I will. Thank you, Chair. I am in favor of this motion, as we have had very few meetings in the last calendar year, so I think it's best for the commission as a whole if we keep Nicole as chair for another year and Jerry as vice chair.
Okay, Commissioner Clark, would you care to speak to your second?
We got to give you a chance to at least once to mess up, so.
I'm not. Okay. Do we need to vote? Or are we okay. Are there any objections to maintaining the officers as for the next year? I see no objection, so we will maintain officers for the next year. There are no items under the consent agenda. So we move on to the regular agenda. And tonight we have, I believe, 2 public hearings. So I'm going to go ahead and read the way in which the public may speak at Urban Design Commission meetings in case there's someone who'd like to speak tonight. So moving on. So number 1, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Urban Design Commission Rules of Procedure. 2A, petitioners, including all his or her representatives, are given 10 minutes. Rebuttal by the petitioner may be allowed when time has been reserved. Item 2B, representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc., are given 5 minutes. And 2C, individuals have 3 minutes. Item 3, when your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. Item 4, an individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Urban Design Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly, which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Urban Design Commission of the resolution, which is the commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. Okay, so moving on to case 1 here, we have 2018-0102. The petitioner is Alaska Airlines. May we have the staff's presentation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an application requesting variances from the sign regulations to allow an oversized sign to be located on the east elevation of the building. Sign location allows wall signs on building elevations that face public streets, face parking lots, and face parking lots which serve the use and have public entrances. In this case, the east elevation of the airplane hangar, Alaska Airlines building, does not have any of these, and therefore it is not permitted to have a wall sign on that building elevation. In terms of sign area, the regulations restrict sign area of a wall sign to 2 square feet per linear foot of the primary frontage and 1.2 square feet per linear foot of the secondary frontage. This would be a secondary frontage. The proposed sign for the east elevation would have 1,136 square feet of sign area, which is 829 square feet of sign area greater than what is allowed. So the variance is for that 829 square feet. No responses were received from the public. No comments were received from the Sand Lake Community Council. The Spenard Community Council passed a resolution opposing the granting of these variances, this application. That can be found on page 29 of your packets. Approval criteria number 1, the planning department finds the criterion is not met. This variance request is for an additional sign on a side of the building that is not allowed, and for a sign that is more than 3 times the permitted size for a sign on a secondary frontage. Approval criteria number 2, we find that it is not met. The hangar is already permitted to have signs in the north and south elevations, but not on the east and west elevations. The size and location of the proposed sign are intended to advertise Alaska Airlines, but the code holds all businesses to the same set of rules, and sign area restrictions are based on the proportion of the building size. For example, a larger building may have a larger sign. Therefore, larger buildings are not disadvantaged in any way from the sign regulations. This variance request is for a sign that is more than 3 times larger than what would otherwise be allowed. It is not compatible in scale with the adjacent land uses, and the location of the Alaska Airlines hangar does not have any unique physical location to justify special exceptions from the sign regulations. Approval criteria number 3 is not met. The proposed variances for sign, location, and size benefit the individual business. The larger sign does not benefit the community as a whole to a better degree than the sign regulations and size requirements. Approval criteria number 4 is met. The proposed sign does not adversely affect the use of adjacent property. The neighboring businesses are aviation related and are not damaged by this sign. Approval criteria number 5 is also met. Airports like Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport are most similar to industrial zoning districts, and oversized signs will not change the character of the zoning. Approval criteria is also met. The variance is not related to ADA accessibility or reasonable accommodation. Approval criteria number 7 is met. The requested variances for sign location and sign area do not affect the health, safety, and welfare of the people in the municipality. Approval criteria number 8 is not met. It's not applicable. The sign variance is not related to maximum sign height. The department finds that approval criteria 1, 2, and 3 are not met and therefore must recommend denial. If after a public hearing the Commission finds that all 8 approval criteria are met, then it should be approved subject to conditions 1 and 2 on page 5 of your packet. I'd be happy to answer questions, and the petitioner is here with the presentation as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Commissioner Sullivan.
I really think this is kind of like subjective, more than code related. It's kind of like the same thing. I feel like it's kind of similar to the design standards, you know, when we're asking for articulation and we have articulation in a different way. I truly believe it's art. I mean, their logo is very artistic, and I don't see it as a design. I actually think that the facade of the building will look better if it has kind of like the drawing of the it's very beautiful. So, I mean, this is like very polemical, like, when do you call it art and when you don't call it art? Could you talk about that?
So the question relates to whether or not this is a sign, because artwork is allowed. The planning department has determined, based on the definition of a sign in our code, that this is a sign. It displays a commercial advertisement for a business. It is a sign. That's an interpretation or determination that's been made by the planning director.
Okay, let's see what everyone else thinks. I mean, this is...
I have a question. Oh, Commissioner Clark?
I guess the question was, and I agree with the question, this seems to be, it's a subjective thing that, yes, this is what the department has said, but not everybody would necessarily be in agreement with the conclusion that the department has come to. Is that correct?
It's difficult to answer. For the planning department, it's not an open question. It's very easy that that a painted graphic that shows the Alaska Airlines airplane tail and logo, the Eskimo, that is an advertisement for the business, and therefore it is a sign. It is not a painting of mountains or something. It is advertising Alaska Airlines as a company. So for the planning department, it's not open in interpretation. But what you said, Commissioner Clark, is I think an accurate comprehension of the situation. Sure.
Commissioner Winchester?
So this determination is specifically done by the planning director. This is not encoded. There's no municipal code that says if something advertises a commercial, any kind of commercial venture, it somehow is a sign. Is that a definition in code, or is that a definition of the department?
What I'm referring to is in code.
Where is that? It's in the code?
2147020. I can read from the regulations. To what occurred, I think that the applicant can describe to you better, how we came to where we are today before you with this these variance requests. I think what happened was, the company with their new building applied for a sign permit and for their other signs, and they showed drawings of the building, and the zoning plan reviewer in the Building Safety Division, Development Services, determined that this was a sign. I think it was discussed, kicked up a higher level because Alaska Airlines wanted to, I think, keep their proposed plan. And so there were internal meetings and discussions, and the original decision by the plan reviewer stayed. It involved my bosses, so. And I wasn't involved with this. This had to do with building safety. I worked in the planning department.
The section's 21.4, you said?
21, it's in old code because this is in the TR district, which remains in the old code. However, the old code and the new code have identical sign regulations.
So it's not in the new code?
No, some parts of town remain in the old code.
Okay.
Most of the municipalities in our current zoning code, but some parts of town, downtown central business districts, the Ted Stevens Airport. There are places around the community that remain in the old code because their zoning wasn't carried forward into the new code. There's reasons for all this. However, the regulations are identical in both codes. They were just reformatted for our current code.
So the wording is exactly the same in both codes?
Yes.
So what is it in the new code? Do you know? So I'm trying to actually look at the words.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I will, may I borrow that for a moment? Yeah. Okay, so Chapter 11 is the sign regulations, and let's see here.
That's all the way back. Yeah.
I think it's under definitions, yeah. So Chapter 14 is our definitions, and let's read the definition of a sign.
14 is the definitions. I knew that was in the back.
Building sign. So the definition, Mr. Winchester, through the chair, of a building sign, this is on Chapter 14, page 37.
Say that again?
Chapter 14, towards the back of your books, page 37,
37, okay.
is the definitions and rules of construction and definitions. And what I'll read from, it's a sign, S for sign, comma, building. Any sign attached to any part of a building, including a wall, awning, canopy, projection sign, including window. A wall sign is a building, so that's the definition. Okay, sign above it. Okay. I'll read from sign. Any visual communication, display, object, device, graphic, structure, or part situated indoors or outdoors or attached to, painted on, or displayed from a building or structure in order to direct or attract attention to or to announce or promote an object, product, place, activity, person, institution, organization, or business, or the like, by means of letters, words, model, banner, flag, pennant, insignia, device, designs, colors, symbols, fixtures, images, illuminations, or representation used as, or which is in the nature of an announcement, direction, or advertisement. That's the definition.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Baxley?
Yes, I wanted to talk about so Sand Lake Community Council didn't have any objections to the sign, is that correct?
The Sand Lake Community Council did not provide any comments. They were sent the case, but they chose not to respond.
Okay. One thing I'm concerned about is that the Spenard Community Council did pass a resolution rejecting the sign. So in the resolution, under the fourth criteria, they had mentioned, it says, whereas the Spenard Community Council is on record opposing sign variances in our council area, and whereas the Spenard Community Council seeks to ensure that areas impacted by this Alaska Airlines project receive significant economic and community benefits, and that any neighborhood impacted likewise receives significant benefit from the project. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spenard Community Council urges that the Urban Design Commission take into account the potential impacts on the economy, or on the economic and community vitality of the area, and reject these two requests for sign variances as noted above. I think that we should take this into account with our decision as well. I think it's really important to take into consideration what community councils agree on and what they reject.
Through the chair, Ms. Baxley, thank you for the comment. I want to provide a point of order at this point. To provide information to the Urban Design Commission. The order of business is for the Planning Department to make a short presentation, for the applicant to, and for the public to have an opportunity to testify as well. After the close of the public hearing, then after a motion is made, you can begin discussing the motion, making findings, sort of discussing things amongst yourselves. And it would be really important for everyone to comment. why they're in support or how they find each of these standards. But we, not to cut short the discussion, but it will be important as a point of order to move to the petitioner's presentation and the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Morse.
Thank you, Chair. Another question for staff. Is there a designation when you're giving us our staff packets that lets us know when you're referring to something in the old code so that we don't go looking for a section we can't find in a new book? Is there a way to put that in our packets to make our jobs a little easier?
Yes, we can do that. Thank you for the comment.
Commissioner Clark?
I don't think this is probably going to be in the petitioner's presentation, but a question I had about the comments from the Spenard Community Council is and this is a real question, not just facetious, but what kind of negative impacts economic impacts do they believe are going to be suffered by the community by the sign being installed?
I think a member of the community council is here that might be able to speak to that issue. I hesitate to speculate. I think that the Spenard Community Council is design-minded. They passed a resolution and sent to the planning department that outlines some of the things that they, as a community council, find important to them. Design is one of those things, and they seem to be opposed to billboard signs, oversized signs.
Are there any other questions for staff? Okay. I think we're moving on. Will the petitioner come forward? Please go ahead and state and spell your name for the record. And let us know if you would like to reserve any of your 10 minutes for rebuttal.
Okay. My name is Jason Gamache. I'm an architect with MCG. We worked on the hangar project, and we are representing Alaska Airlines as the petitioner. And yes, I would like to reserve 2 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you.
And I have a short presentation I'd like to share with you that explains some of the points that were addressed earlier in your comments. And I apologize with the with the limited amount of time. I'll have to go pretty quickly over some very technical items. But if you have any questions, I would be happy to address them. Okay, so also thank you all for attending. I know you've seen my face here a couple times, and I appreciate your ability to sort of stay with us as we've gone through the months to hopefully get a fuller board. And we're really thankful for the staff's time as well and your presentation, your report. And I realize too, on a professional side, that their job is to look at it black and white, and that's what they've provided with you. I would like to address that, acknowledge that, but also show you some of the other points of view that we've taken into requesting this variance. So first of all, very quickly in an agenda, going to look at the project site overview, staff findings, which they already talked about, but we'll go into a little bit more detail quickly. Our request, then public testimony, obviously, and then time for rebuttal. Very quickly, our project is a 100,000 square foot maintenance hangar at the airport. It opened in November of last fall. I wanted to point out we are in the Sand Lake Community Council. We are not in the Spenard Community Council. That's the location of our site. So later you will hear public testimony against that. I just wanted you to be aware of the difference. And we are in a classification airport, railroad, and port facility zone, which is transitional TR in the old code. Here's an aerial site image of our site, kind of just to give you some context about where it is located at the airport around other hangar and aircraft aviation facilities. Here is a picture taken last winter of the facade of the building from the street. And then here is the picture of the backside of the facility from the runway. And later on I'll talk about that signage on the south side, which is the runway side. And then here are two conceptual images of what the building has been built to look like as of today. I've cited the two variances that we've requested. One is frontage and one is signage standards. Our original design included, as was mentioned, aircraft tail, that the MOA considers signage. That is an interpretation, and we'll talk a little bit about that briefly as well too. As noted, there were agency comments, had no objection to variance request. There were responses sent out, or mailers sent out to 113 addresses with no responses, and the Sand Lake Community Council also did not object. They did not respond. 3 out of the 8 criteria considered not met. I'd like to talk about those 3 items and hopefully convince you to accept all 8. And then here is quickly an image of our proposal. This is what we would like to do. This is on the east side of the hangar. And here is an image driving down Airport Road, which would show you what it would look like from the road. We do have another hangar next to us that is blocking that image partially from this viewpoint. And also there are a number of other buildings in this area with signage on the side. Perhaps from older codes, we don't know, but it does fit the nature of the area. And then this is from Jewel Lake Road. And if you notice from Jewel Lake Road, it's very hard to see any signage on that building whatsoever. Again, we'll talk later about why we want to put image on the side of the building and a technical viewpoint as to why that should be allowed. Again, we agree with staff on criteria 5 through 8 being met. We disagree with them on criteria 1, 2, and 3 not being met, and we'll tell you why. Criteria 1, company logo facing neighboring business is not permitted. Technically, the ambassador that is on the tail of the aircraft is not a logo. We do agree it is a brand image of Alaska Airlines, but it is not technically a logo. So again, the objection is, do we really qualify this as a sign or not? And to that matter, our neighbor who that image is facing does not object to us putting this image on the side of our building. Provide effective means of wayfinding. We think it does. Afford a community equal fair advertising, promote our products. We do, and again, it has to do with the viewpoint from Jewel Lake Road being over 1,600 feet away. And then reducing sign clutter. Again, we disagree. We don't believe it's sign clutter. Criteria 2, is that my timer? Okay, just trying to keep an eye on that too. Staff reason is that does not achieve the 2020 comprehensive plan according to scale, adjacent land uses, incompatible uses with adjoining one another. Again, as was actually cited earlier, we believe the location and the surrounding by aviation facilities, most hangars and maintenance facilities, which are not accessible to the public. So that's a point of clarification too. Our building is not a business for public to arrive to. It is authorized personnel only. Being in this transition zone, which is somewhat industrial zone at the airport, we believe it is compatible. The hangar has signs on the north and south, that is correct. And the word mark that says Alaska, that is actually their brand logo. That is their official registered trademark brand logo. The ambassador that's on the tail of the aircraft is not. And so we have used the word mark Alaska, the signature, on the front of the building as well as on the south of the building. We are allowed 2 signs. One thing we would like to point out, however, is that the sign on the south side of the building is not public facing. It faces the runway. Perhaps we should be credited for that square footage. And then the other thing is this artwork, this image, this graphic that we're proposing is obstructed from International Road as the image I showed you before. However, it would be visible from the Jewel Lake Road, which I showed you, which again is over 1,600 feet away. And we have an exception we'd like to talk about. Criteria 3, that was not met. The reason, sign benefits individual businesses only. It is unclear if the proposed sign is better to the whole community TSA, which employs $850 million per year, with 12.5% jobs in Anchorage. We don't disagree with that statement. However, we would say that this project was an incredible boost to our economy locally when it was being built and continues to be. The project was a $50 million hangar, and employing more local employment to make the graphic on the side of the building is another $75,000. That would be a boost to local economy. And no, that does not go to me. Again, the project is in this airport area, and the airport as well as the municipality have deemed this as an aviation district with the hope of promoting that to attract more businesses and encourage aviation development. Again, the neighboring business, which the image would face, does not object, nor does the airport. And I just wanted to restate our fact that we believe that it is an image and not a logo. I wanted to show you real quick. This was where we started the idea. The client came to us of another hangar that they have with an image of the ambassador, 75 feet tall, on the side of the building. And we did not feel that was complementary to the design of our building originally. And
Commissioner Sullivan.
Can you please continue talking?
Sure. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So we advised that this would not be appropriate for the elevation of the building, and this instead was our proposal, which is an image of the aircraft tail. We would like to point out that Alaska Airlines and other airlines across the country have many different schemes of designs on their aircraft as well as their aircraft tails. This one that you're seeing right now represents Hawaii. Here's another image that represents a dog sled team. And our point is that just because it's art on a plane doesn't make it a logo. The ambassador is artwork. It is on the tailplane. We do agree it is brand recognizable, but it's not technically a logo. So we disagree with the code language as stated for considering this to be signage. Again, versus this or this, which we could do, we are proposing this instead. The request is for these two variances that we've cited above. One would allow us this additional secondary signage on the side of the building, and the other variance that we're requesting would be because that there is an exception in this code that allows for additional signage if you are 200 feet or more away from an arterial road or a main road, that we would be permitted to have additional signage on the side of the building. And we're saying that if you are allowed to have that because of the distance and the scale of the building, we should be allowed to increase that area. So again, I don't have enough time to get very technical about that, but I will have more comments in my rebuttal. But in the meantime, I'm happy to open it up to public commentary.
Thank you. Commissioner Morse.
Start with a simple question. Can you state whether or not you're calling him the ambassador? I think most of us know him as the Eskimo. Is that a trademark?
It is not a trademark, no.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Winchester, I think we may have questions for the petitioner.
And Commissioner Morris, I did want to point out too, it may be registered, but I don't believe it's trademarked.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a difference there.
Okay, Commissioner Winchester?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So question, were you at the Spanard Community Council meeting?
No, I wasn't.
So you weren't aware of that particular situation that evolved out of the Spanard Community Council? Or you must be aware of it, but not?
I'm aware of it when it showed up in our report from the staff. That was the first time we learned about it. Otherwise, we would have been happy to go talk to them.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Clark?
So if my understanding is correct, this is visible from the Sand Lake Community Council's area, but not from the Spanard?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Baxley?
And just for clarification, it's east, it's facing east towards the mountains.
In your presentation, you said that you had sent out 113 mailers. Where did those mailers go?
The municipality did,
Okay.
and maybe Francis could answer that question.
To the residents and the property owners within a 500-foot, a minimum 500-foot radius, and to a minimum of 50 properties.
Okay, thank you.
The application was also routed to both the Spenard Community Council and the Sand Lake Community Council because the Spenard Community Council is in such close proximity. The code says that if another community council is within 1,000 feet of the petition site, then we must send it to both community councils. So we sent the petitioner's application to both community councils. Also, the petitioner posted signs at the property, blue signs noticing this public hearing. It was publicly noticed through these alerts that go out to the community council, to people who sign up for them on the planning department webpage, and it was the case and the information related to this are also posted on our webpage. I think those are all the different ways that we notice the case.
How do you notice the case? Do you send a copy of the application including the graphic, the image?
The public hearing notice mailers that you may have received at home one day, they're a trifold that just states some of the basics about the request and the property owner, and then on the other side of it is the of this notice that gets mailed out is the a map showing the petition site or the location where the property is located. The community councils both got the full application packet, same as the traffic engineer, same as me, what's in the file. The full application and the packet, including the department's staff report, that's also posted on our webpage. And it's available for anyone that wants to come into the planning counter to look in the file as well.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for the petitioner? Hearing none, we will move on to the public testimony. Is there anyone here who would care to speak? Please make sure to state and spell your name.
Thank you. I'm a little nervous because I don't usually have prepared, and I've written a lot in the interim, so I can answer some of the questions that are going around here, so bear with me, please. My name is Margaret Auth. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on this on behalf of the Spenard Community Council, so I am representing Spenard Community Council tonight. There's so many questions that have already come up that it's kind of diverged from what I had written, but I'll just go ahead with this and fill it in. We are looking at this request from Alaska Airlines for a variance in the sign ordinance. Please bear in mind that in November 1998, the people of Alaska voted to ban all billboard signs in order to protect the view sheds of our beautiful state. In the early 2000s, Diamond Parking erected a sign just a little further down International Airport Road to the east that for all intents and purposes was a billboard. The community was very upset about the sign, but the municipality allowed the owners to keep their sign and amortize it over a period of 10 years, after which the sign was supposed to come down. Thanks to the effort of one community member who kept track of the due date over 10 years, our community came out and spoke against the sign over and over again in a 3-year period after the owners had been cited for an illegal sign. That sign finally came down only a year and a half ago. Now we have a request for another sign that is in essence another billboard. There is no need for this sign to be so large. There is nothing that is terribly unique about Alaska Airlines and their building that they need to point out that they're Alaska Airlines building. In fact, their logo was part of their official presentation tonight. Alaska Airlines has spent millions of dollars on cultivating that very image of the Alaska Native man as their brand. Millions. I'm sure they'd be very upset if they saw somebody else using something similar. The sign would be an advertisement, a very large advertisement for Alaska Airlines. This is not an art rendering. This is branding. This is advertising. We already fought this issue with Diamond Parking. The community of Spenard does not want this sign. This is not in Spenard Community Council, but is right across the road, and that's why, as Francis stated, they allow the community councils to know when these kind of things come because it's right on the boundary. And right now, Spenard Community Council, along with Turnagain Community Council, is working to improve Spenard Beach Park. And we just have started to meet, and when you're standing at Spenard Beach Park, you're looking directly across to that big building. In fact, several people hadn't been out there in the last year, and they're surprised at how large that building is. And you can see it all the way over into what is across the road, the residential area. So even though Mr. Gamache is saying that it is not in Sand Lake Community Council, Spenard Community Council area, it is where we can see it. Sand Lake Community Council residents all live on the other side. They can't even see the building at all because the airport is buffering it. And, you know, to be honest, I think that the notices that have been sent out to the residential members of the community or the businesses, it is very heavily tilted towards businesses there because it is the airport. And then you have the hotel, you have the airplane businesses that go out for flights, things like that. But right on the other side of the road, which is looking at that building, are the residents. So yes, it will affect. And yes, you can see that because my husband and I walk out to Lake Hood from Spenard Road almost every night. And you can see that building. And you can see the east side of it from Spenard. So yes, it is going to affect Spenard Community Council. And we've been trying for a long time to work on Spenard Road, and we're coming further down. Now we're trying to do these Spenard Beach improvements, and this is going to be a negative impact, and we've been trying for a long time. We just got done with Diamond Parking. We don't want to start the meter running again. So thank you for your time to allow me to address this body. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. We do have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
Commissioner Clark?
Thank you for your comments. Are you concerned about this particular sign about this particular sign, or?
Commissioner Clark, could you turn on your mic?
I did. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Are you concerned about this particular sign, or are you concerned because you think it might set a precedent for other signs?
I think both, but I think the precedent thing is very worrisome. I was on the body that met about signs back in the 90s, and that was one of the things that we were talking about is precedent. And it is worrisome because it's very difficult to tell another business that might be in town that has a very distinctive logo, but everybody knows who they are. Say, for instance, Hilton, or Sheridan, where you can actually, the minute you see it, you can see the logo in your head. And so there's the precedent is a big issue. I mean, I think that this is definitely, to us, advertising, because it is so strongly associated with Alaska Airlines. I mean, they've done a good job in branding. And when you see that Native man, that's what I think of is the first thing is Alaska Airlines.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan?
My question was similar. So if it wasn't part of Alaska Airlines and you was driving and you will see this graphic and you don't know it's related to Alaska Airlines, will it bug you, the Native guy, that it's an ugly sign or graphic? Or, I mean, I coincide with you that signage is horrible. And when everyone starts putting signage up, it's terrible. Signage codes are meant to prevent things from getting out of hand. But when they are trying to go farther and integrate a graphic into the architecture of the building, and they are trying to my eyes, I would rather see a graphic than a flat wall. I just think it's more alive, the building. But it's a very confusing issue. Signs, art, it's signage, art. There's definitely horrible signage, but there's also art. And I don't know about what was the decision that it's not a logo. I agree with them. It's not their logo. It's a graphic that they use. So I just don't understand how could we call it signage. So my question is, will it bug you if you don't know that it's related to Alaska Airlines and there's someone just builds a building and then they decide to put a big graphic of Eskimo? Would that bug you? Like, will you hate it?
Well, I guess the thing is, if I understand your question, I'm not saying that it's ugly, but I'm saying that the way it's presented in the packet is very distinctively attached to Alaska Airlines. I mean, the way I look at it is a major corporation, which they are, spends millions of dollars cultivating an image. And because they're no longer in Alaska, the one way that it makes it easier for people to think of Alaska is the iconic Native Alaskan man. And I think that when you're trying to separate the two, I think what they do is very good. I think they've been very, very effective in putting the two together so that our brains think of Alaska Airlines and the Alaska Native man. When I'm in another part of the country and I see that logo on the back of a plane, I don't have to see the words Alaska Airlines. I can see it across the airport and I know that's Alaska Airlines. So to me, they're intertwined and they're the same thing. And that's why I do not believe this is not advertising. And I think if they wanted to have a graphic, I think they could do something like that where they can have the Northern Lights, they can have a family of Eskimos. They can do a lot of things to make the side of the building look attractive. But I think there's a very distinct reason that they want it to be that logo, that image.
So, and my last question is, how is it going to affect people? I mean, what's going to do?
Well, I'm sure some people thought that the diamond sign was effective because everybody knew where diamond parking was. But the fact of the matter, it was not in compliance. And as somebody who's been very active with zoning issues for the last 25 years, working on enhancing our community, I think there's a reason that we have the ordinances that we do. And I think that it's incumbent on everybody to follow the same rules. So I'm not coming out against Alaska Airlines. I'm just saying that these are the rules that we're all asking everybody to live by. And I'm just asking for Alaska Airlines to also live by those. I'm not saying that it's a harm like some people think of harm, but I think that it's a harm to other businesses that will not be able to have the same advantage because they may not be as big or something, that they can't get the same square footage on the side of their building.
Okay. I think I truly believe it should not be about square footage. It should be about type, what it is. But thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Winchester.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, is probably the only one in the room who was here when the diamond parking sign was put before the commission, and we did resolve that issue. There's probably some other people in the audience, but From my perspective, or from where we sit, having been born and raised in Anchorage as I am, the diamond parking sign was a major atrocity. And I think we will all agree that it got put up at a time and right in a slice of space. But it's very difficult for me to equate this to the diamond parking. And I have to say that because I drove by the diamond parking sign for 30, 40 years, or 30 years at least. So what my question is and so I'd like to really step away from that emotional issue, which I know carries a lot of weight with you, potentially with myself or others that were involved in that, and step away from that and say, what do you want on the side of that building? I mean, the bottom line is, this is a huge building, it's an airport, it's always going to be an airport, we're going to have big buildings built by it. Yes, there they are, those big hangars that support aviation and 12,000 jobs, and this is the place in the world that is only 9 hours from every other major capital of the world. So we are always going to be a major airport facility. So to sit there and say, okay, we're going to build these big hangars and now say, well, we're just going to live with 400-foot sidewalls of blue, to me is like, okay, we should be allowing something else to happen. And if this was, as you just said, if this was some other graphic, the Northern Lights or whatever, you're going to be fine with it. To me, a graphic is a graphic is a graphic. It allows for some sort of symbolism. You could say that Northern Lights is going to say something about Fairbanks or whatever, and it's advertising Fairbanks. There's all kinds of advertising from graphics and art. The question is, does this fit the model of a piece of art, or does it fit advertising? And I think you can't just say, because I've identified that symbol, now all of a sudden it means Alaska Airlines for everyone everywhere. If you took that symbol to Nairobi, I guarantee you they're not going to know what it is. It does to us, yes, but it doesn't to them. So the question becomes one of where do we draw these lines? What would you, I mean, you say you can see this building from all the way across Spenard Lake, which I'm sure you can, but you're willing to accept any other graphic on that wall other than the Alaska Airlines Eskimo?
Well, it's if I look at the packet, it's not just the Eskimo. It actually looks like the tail. That's a plane. I mean, that is basically what they fly in and out on many of their planes. And I'm thinking, what is the difference between that and advertising? I mean, they have spent, I guess I'd have to put it to you, do you think they would have spent millions of dollars of painting that same image on their planes over and over again if they didn't want to cultivate that as the branding, as the image of Alaska Airlines? And if you're doing branding and imaging, what is the difference between opening a magazine and you see something, and that's why sometimes in advertising magazines, they'll have something very subtle and you'll instantly recognize it, the symbol of it and what it means and who it is. And it doesn't have to be much. And I understand I can see where you think that it's not the worst thing and it's on an airport property, but I guess you could say in downtown that maybe Hilton Hotel should also put a great big H that's 4 stories high because they're downtown and it's a hotel. I mean, I think that this...
I don't mean to interrupt, but we don't need to go on. I understand what your point is. But you're bringing up things that are not necessarily within code. They don't meet the requirements. This actually met some of the requirements of code in terms of size and location and variances, et cetera. And so I think that's fine. I was asking, only question I asked you was, would you accept anything else on the wall except the Alaska Airlines tail?
Well, I mean, you're asking me personally, and I haven't had a chance. They never came to the Spenard Community Council.
Well, but there's 1,000
So-
other things that could go on that wall.
So
that-
we never, as a community,
Mhm.
had the opportunity to address
But you won't
this.
have the opportunity, because essentially, if it's a piece of art, you're going to get whatever you get. I mean, in other words, it won't come back before this board, and it's not going to be a public hearing, so we have to decide here tonight. If it's going to be something else, they're going to go find something else to put on that wall that's a piece of artwork, because I don't think Alaska Airlines likes the idea of this big blue wall just being their sidewall. They're going to put some art on it. So the question is, what do we want on it, or what do we want to help advise them to put on that? And I think Dave proposed one thing, and you're saying, well, I don't know what anything else would be, but man, it could be anything else, and we won't hear about it. It'll just get painted on.
What I'm saying is
Because the code
that
allows it.
if they had come and discussed it with the community council, we would have at that time.
Yeah, and I understand that, and unfortunately, they didn't get invited or know about it, and so it would have been good to have had that interaction for sure. And I appreciate that. I think it's a good point. Thank you.
Wait, just 1 second, I'm sorry. We have a couple more questions for you. Commissioner Morse?
Mine is actually point of information for the rest of the commissioners. A logo is defined as a symbol or other design adopted by an organization to identify its product. I think that's important because the word logo is being thrown around a lot.
Thank you. Okay, one more. We have Commissioner McKee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does the Spenard Community Council find the logo aesthetically unappealing?
Well, I have to admit, we didn't discuss that as that. We discussed it in terms of, to us, it appeared as advertising. Just, I know I've been told not to bring this up about diamond parking, but it's just the idea that it was a sign in the same vein, yes.
Well, the diamond parking one was a billboard, which is a very large sign separated from the building, whereas this is going to be painted on the building. And so I was asking if because we didn't know what your objections were, is if the Spenard Community Council found the logo aesthetically unappealing. Because with an art installation, they could paint essentially anything that they want on the side of the building without necessarily bringing it back to the Spenard Community Council's attention, and it could be something significantly larger and potentially less aesthetically appealing than their logo.
I mean, I guess that sometimes people can put up anything they want, but the community is still going to respond.
Right, and so I'm asking if whether the Spenard Community Council found the logo aesthetically unappealing.
We did not discuss it as such.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would wish to speak?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Irene Pearson Gamble. I was also born and brought up in Spenard, like Jerry.
Can you spell your name for me?
Persson-Gamble, G-A-M-B-L-E. The issue, I was at that meeting, I voted on it, but I am not speaking on behalf of the council. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I am in that council, and I heard the story from there. I also got the pink notice in my mail, and I thought about writing out my opinion, but I knew I could come here tonight. It is not about aesthetics, and I don't think it's appropriate to ask one person, do you like the picture or not? It sounds racist to me that you're trying to bring that kind of, well, if you don't think a Native man isn't wonderful, why in the world? Ooh. That isn't the issue. The issue is code. It's too large. We don't want that kind of large signage in any part of Alaska or Anchorage. It reminds me, if we keep going that size, it's a lovely building. Everybody flies Alaska. We love the airline. Great service, great safety. That's not the issue. It's the size and the location. It's not necessary. We all know who they are. And instead, I would recommend that they take that money, $75,000 to keep so many painters and safety people employed, to go across the way and work on maybe adding something to the community, as in that Lake Spenard Beach Park, which is where I learned to swim before they wouldn't allow it, And just make that the scene of when you sit there at that beach, yes, you can see that big, huge building and it's fine. But to do it on the other side, again, as you're driving there, whether you live in Sand Lake or not, you are going to see this oversized piece of art, logo, advertising, but it's just unnecessarily large. And I think that's the issue. My mother and father lived right there before they passed away, and that diamond sign went up right in front of the mountains. And I will tell you that my mother died at 91 complaining about that sign, and about, 5 years later it came down. So this is the kind of stuff, you don't want that whole area to end up looking like Times Square in New York. It's just unnecessarily large.
Thank you.
Anybody want to argue?
Are there any questions?
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Love Alaska Airlines.
Good evening. My name is Robert Auth, A-U-T-H. I also am a member of the Spenard Community Council, longtime resident of Spenard, and I have been a past president of the Spenard Community Council, but not when this matter came up, and I'm speaking for myself. As has been mentioned before, the diamond parking situation did solidify the council's positions somewhat with regard to oversized signage, but that is because Spenard is surrounded by the airport, by huge hotels, by huge car parks, and we can't stop buildings like this from being built. This is a 75-foot tall building that can be seen in many parts of our area. We have no control over whether that building gets built because it's all zoned properly. We have no control over these car parking areas that are huge and tremendously lit up, or the hotels that are tremendously large and lit up. But we do have some say as to where and the size of signage, and we take a strong position because we are surrounded by potentially very large signs, and the standard cannot be aesthetically pleasing. Oversized signs are fine, and ugly signs should be banned. That can't be the criteria, and it's not the criteria. That's why we oppose all variances for signage, and we were one of the councils that initiated the signage ordinance because signs were getting out of control. And so it is one small area that we have control over to apply, to assert ourselves with regard to this, and this is what we've done. And I don't think it's unreasonable for the community to say we don't want more signage than is allowed under the code, and even on a side of the building where signage isn't even allowed, there's an oversized sign. I don't think it's unreasonable for people to say, hey, for everybody, we say no to everybody because it's the only way to control the environment that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have a question for you, Mr. Auth. Commissioner Clark?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Ott, you say that you didn't have any control over these issues of size of the building and such as that. Hypothetically, would you have been, or are you not in favor of those types of buildings in that area?
Well, I mean, it's given that it's so close to the edge of the airport, so close to International Airport Road, and it is so large. There's I don't know because it's so new, but there's also a noise factor with planes coming in and out of that hangar, and so I mean we're sensitive to all sorts of development at the airport, but we don't have much control over it. I would certainly rather have had the hangar put on the whole other side of the runway rather than on the neighborhood. I call it the neighborhood side because it's right along International Airport Road. It's about as close to the residential area that you can build something on the airport.
Well, I live in the Sand Lake area, and I can tell you that there's a neighborhood on the other side, and there's things on the other side of the airport. Thank you very much
Yes,
for responding.
okay. All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Please remember to state your name and spell.
My name is Marilyn Romano. Last name is spelled R-O-M-A-N-O. My husband and I live in the Spenard area, but I also am the Regional Vice President for the State of Alaska for Alaska Airlines. Thank you for having me. I just have a few brief remarks because I know Mr. Gamache has pretty much covered everything. I just want to kind of a little history. We broke ground on this $50 million hangar in 2016 with community leaders, including Mayor Berkowitz, there to mark the beginning of this signature infrastructure project for Anchorage. And we held the ribbon cutting on November 7th, 2018, with over 300 attendees present to celebrate the completion of the facility.
Can you hold for just one moment?
sorry.
I'm sorry. Could you pause that?
Point of information, is this rebuttal time?
No.
No.
Are you speaking on behalf of the petitioner? It sounds like you're speaking as on behalf of the petitioner. Are you speaking as an individual or as the vice president of the Alaska Airlines department you work for?
As Alaska Airlines.
Is that considered part of the petition?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You tend to have a conflict of interest, I guess, in that you are.
I probably do have a conflict of interest.
Okay, so I guess we would.
This is very brief, so you want me
I
to?
think
What do you want me to?
you can discuss with Mr. Gamache if you would like to make it part of the rebuttal.
Question for the commission. Can we split the time? Can she have like a minute and then I have a minute for rebuttal?
Sure. Right. So now we're going to keep going with public testimony, so I think we'll wait for your presentation until rebuttal time. Okay.
So,
Right. Anyone from the public that wishes to speak? Please come forward and state your name and spell it for the record.
My name's Shane Duran, D-U-R-A-N-D. Just a quick comment. This process, it's hard for an applicant to get all the information out that is relevant to the situation. And I would love to hear from the applicant the history behind that artwork on the tail. That's artwork that isn't the first thing that's been on the tail of their aircraft. I believe they had, prior to that, there was artwork of a little girl maybe and a pilot. So there's history to the artwork that's on there. And like a Nike shoe, every shoe you get has a swoosh on it. Every Alaska Airlines plane says Alaska Airlines on it, but not every one of them has that artwork on the tail. And driving to the airport, there's a giant blue wall. I would much prefer to see something that visually breaks that wall up. And I suppose they could probably paint a giant aircraft on the side of the wall that includes the tail. You know, are they going to be in that same position of trying to defend that as a logo, a sign, or artwork? So I would just ask if somebody could maybe ask the applicant the history of that artwork on the tail. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to come forward to speak? And please state your name and spell it for the record.
My name is Dave Mabius, and I'm the owner of Sign Co. I'm the manufacturer of all the signs, and I actually have nothing to do with Jason except for that we both work on the same building, but I just wanted to bring up a couple.
Can you spell your name really quick?
Oh, I'm sorry. Last name is Mabius, M-A-B as in boy, E as in Edward, U-S as in Sam. So I guess one of the points that I would like to make is that we are a local manufacturing company, and I employ anywhere from 10 to 20 and even have been employing upwards of 25 people at my company, and it's economy driven. And the Alaska Airlines project has meant a world to us. I'm a local manufacturer. A lot of people think that these signs come from other places in other parts of the country, but we manufacture everything that you see on that building. The graphics, all the lighted letters, all the street sign, that was all done in a local shop, which is my business. And so I'm pretty excited. I really like to see, I look at that building in a different light than what's been expressed tonight. I look at that building and I just love it because Alaska Airlines has employed so many businesses such as myself. And so I really look forward to hopefully being able to do this graphic image on the side. One is because I'm proud of what I do, and I know Alaska Airlines is proud of what they do, and that's what they're trying to express. And the other part is that I'm employing more people. We're on the lower end of employment right now, where we're at about 10 employees instead of the 25 that we've been in the past. And that's because our economy is not doing so good. So this is a big boost. That $75,000 is going to my company, and I definitely take that personal when somebody says, hey, don't employ people, let's put it in a park. It's like, wait a minute, if we're not employed, where are we going to go? We're not going to be here anymore. I know people that have been up against very restrictive sign codes in other parts of the country that have come to Alaska. And they seem to get chased around from place to place. And we're not all into building big, ugly signs. I don't look at this as a big, ugly sign. I look at this as a big piece of artwork. It has a native guy on the side of the building. It makes a big statement about Alaska. I've been here for 40 years, and I look at that building, and I look at that native guy on the side of that building, and I'm proud of it, and I just want to express that. The other point that I would like to say, and I'm saying this as myself, not representing what Alaska Airlines is saying. Is it okay to keep talking? Yeah, okay, and this is really the final point that I would like to make, but I really believe that image is meant to be read from the airport, not from the street. As you've seen from the image that was shown from the international street side, you can't really see it. But when the airlines come in and they come circling around after they've landed, it's an image thing that Alaska Airlines is saying, this is our building, we're proud of it, and we want to make it look good. And that's, I think it's more to be read from the airstrip than it is to be read from the road. And that's it. That's all I have to say. I appreciate you hearing me.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is there anyone else? No. Okay, so we will close the, public testimony. Okay, sorry. Okay, sorry. Would the petitioner like to use their remaining time for rebuttal? And if you would like to, I don't know if you would like to have us partition your time here?
We decided that I'm going to run through my closing statement, and if there's time left, she would like to speak within that time frame, but
Perfect.
Otherwise I'm just going to run with it. So
when it turns, I'm sorry, you do have 2 minutes. When it turns yellow, you will have 1 minute.
So again, thank you. In terms of rebuttal, it sounds like the diamond sign comparison was made, and we all recognize it's 1.5 miles away, and it's in a different zone. It is a billboard detached from a building. This is a different conversation. And so I would like to just close with a couple other thoughts. Again, this is our proposal. Commissioner Winchester, you are correct. And Mr. Durman, I appreciate his testimony. I wasn't expecting it actually, but that was something I wanted to talk about very early on, was the fact that we have this blue wall. We would like to put something on there. We will put something on there. And our call to you, our ask tonight, is to help us make that decision of what that looks like. Because if we approve our proposal, then you get to pick what the image is. Otherwise, I think you stated that we didn't have to come back for additional artwork. So here's some precedent set around town. This is the MLMP out on the highway. This is the whale mural downtown. This is sled dog mural downtown. This is a history of Anchorage at the City Hall. And those are all legal within the current code. We could do other options. We could have a mural of aircraft from the company's past if they don't have logos on them. We could cover the building with a timeline of history of aviation in Alaska, just as the mural is downtown at City Hall. We could have other colorful images on the side of the building. We could put a fuselage of an aircraft on the side of the building with tail and engine and wingtips. In this case, with respect to the staff's determination that the logo on the tail disqualifies that, or qualifies that as a sign, that we would not be able to put that, but rather we could put this.
Looks like we're out of time. Oh, Commissioner Winchester?
Yes, could you please continue with the final piece there?
Thank you very much, Commissioner Winchester. So very quickly, I told you earlier showed you the sample of the aircraft painted with a Hawaiian theme. Per current rules, we could do that. Or we could just include the tail from that aircraft in place of the tail that we're proposing. This would qualify as acceptable. We could use this aircraft with the Eskimo, or we could just put the tail with that Eskimo on the tail on the side of the building to cover up this blue space versus the one that we're proposing. This would be acceptable. However, we're not asking for any of those. We're asking for this one, which is the tail of the aircraft that we're showing here. And so in closing, I'd like to show you these three images. This is really what our ask is. Our ask is the side of the building is blue. We would like to enhance that with an architectural feature of artwork or graphics or something to that nature that is appropriate for that building. Option A, according to the interpretation that was made at the municipality by a person or small group of individuals, says that A is not allowed. However, option B is allowed and option C is allowed. And we're asking for a variance based on the two technical exceptions that we stated earlier to allow us to move forward with option A. And I don't mean to say this in any kind of threatening demeanor whatsoever, but the intent of the client is to do something artistic on that side of the building to help fill in that blue void, that blue wall. And that's what we're here to ask you for permission to do.
Thank you. We have a question from Commissioner Winchester.
Yes, I wanted to hear a little bit about the history of that particular, and maybe your lady from Alaska Airlines could tell us about the history, because in some ways, at least from my perspective, that image is Alaska as a state, not just Alaska Airlines. And it's always represented Alaska everywhere it goes. And to say that it's just Alaska Airlines, I think, probably means the reason why it's not a registered trademark and some of those kinds of issues, because that particular image, and maybe she can explain about that. If you could please give us a little background.
Sure. And again, my name is Marilyn Romano, and I'm the Regional Vice President for the state of Alaska. And I can share with you, we got our start here in 1932 with one airplane, and over the years, the image on the tail has changed. And at one point in the 70s, there were actually 3 images. This was one, then there was a gold miner, and now I'm losing, and one was a totem pole. And then there was a discussion, and came out of that discussion that this image represented Alaska. We got our start here. We were an airline that was getting ready to expand out of Alaska into Seattle and to grow beyond. But we never wanted to lose touch of our roots. So he is an artist interpretation of an Alaska native. Some people think that he has a name. Some people think he's from Kotzebue. Some people think he's from Nome. But he represents our values, our culture, our history. That's what he represents. That's what we see. That's what we talk about inside our company. I hope that helps.
Thank you. And I guess the question is, did you have anything else you needed to add to that regarding the company's evaluation of this? Because I think it's important that we hear that.
When we see that internally in our company, that what we see is that's who we are culturally as a company. It's about our history. It's about paying homage to the people who got us where we are today and never losing track of that. So for us, of course we don't find it offensive. And yes, it is on the tail of every single airplane that flies all over the country. And to be honest, to a question that was asked earlier, there are people in other parts of the country that don't know what that is when it lands in their city. We would love that to be different, but that's the truth. But to us here, and there's 100 people, there's 100 mechanics, engineers that work in this building, and they're very proud of that image. They're very proud of working on those airplanes and keeping people in the state of Alaska safe every day. And so for them, when they heard that they don't even understand why this is a problem, because now they're saying, do people not understand what this means to us? So that's really what we have 1,800 employees here in the state of Alaska, and this image means a great deal to them, and there's great pride in that. And there's great pride from people who hopefully fly with us and know what we try to do, and that image to a lot of people means home. If you talk to people in the state of Alaska when they see this airplane in Atlanta or Florida or the East Coast, and they say, that's taking me home. That's what it means to them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan? Commissioner Clark?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Having worked for a competitor of yours a long time ago, Wien Airlines, I'm quite proud of what Alaska Airlines has done, but there was mention made about taking the money and putting it someplace else. If it's not, I believe that the Alaska Airlines does do some of that in various parts of our community, do they not?
Yes, sir. In the state of Alaska alone, we give about $4 million a year in either tickets or cash. And we support things even around the Alaska Aviation, the Heritage Museum, the Aviation Museum right across the street, right there by Lake Hood. We support in a great way and have for a very long time, and will continue to do so.
Thank you very much.
Doesn't look like there are any other questions for the petitioner. So the public hearing is now closed. So now we need to make a motion. And remember, we can discuss this before we decide. Looks like we have a motion from Commissioner Clark and a second from Commissioner Winchester. Commissioner Clark, could you please state your motion?
My motion is to approve the petitioner's request for variances. Not sure if I'm doing that completely correctly.
State the case number.
Case number 2018-0102. variance from AMC 21.47.030B, determining building frontage and building unit, and AMC 21.47.060A, basic standards for building designs for the location and size of a wall sign in the TR Transition District.
Sorry. Commissioner Clark, do you intend to support, or could you speak to whether you support the motion?
Yes, I do support the motion. I am going to vote for it. I have not worked at an airport for a long time, but I worked at the airport up in Fairbanks for quite a while. I think the airport is very, very relevant to our community. There are some folks that anything that goes on out there is going to be too much. Unfortunately, I think that's very unfortunate. I think that Eskimo on the tail of that airplane is artwork. I remember when the Eskimo did not have a smile, and there was quite a bit of discussion when the frown was turned to a smile. I think it speaks to Alaska. When I see that in other places in the country, it makes me proud to be Alaskan. And I see no problem with that being considered artwork on that building. I do not think that is the Alaska Airlines signage. It may be, but I don't think it's signage, and that's why I support the petition.
Thank you. Now, for the difficult part, we need to speak to each of the approval criteria and how the standard is met.
I can help with that. Would you like me to help him?
If you would like for Commissioner Winchester to speak to his motion, he may be able to assist on this.
I would defer to Commissioner Winchester.
Would you care to speak to your second?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I will be supporting the motion, and I likewise believe that this piece of artwork, which has been evolved over many, many decades in Alaska, is a symbol of Alaska, and it's not just a symbol of Alaska Airlines, and I think we all accept that. And the fact that advertising on the basis of a piece of artwork is a very subjective thing, and therefore I'm going to support this. I think that it provides a means for wayfinding in the community. I think that it affords the community an equal and fair way as far as criteria 1 to advertise and promote its products and services. I think that the image is not obtrusive. It basically can only be seen when you get fairly close to it. I've actually driven by that building several times to look at this particular situation. I believe that from Spenard Lake and across on the residential areas, it's a very long distance away. There aren't really any residences on the south side of Lake Spenard. Everything is on the north side. And so I think that it's actually almost equally visible from some of the homes across the airport over in the Jewel Lake area as it is from across Spenard. So I don't see that there's that much difference. I do believe that the sign is not a company logo. It's been specifically stated that it's not a trademark. It's a piece of artwork. Certainly it has been used on the tail of the aircraft, but it does symbolize Alaska and not just Alaska Airlines. As far as criteria 2, I believe that it does achieve the 2020 comprehensive plan. It's surrounded by aviation facilities. This is an airport. It's mostly hangars and maintenance facilities. As we all know, there are even other signage issues on sides of buildings out there. And I think that, we need to take some pride in this airport, and certainly the pride that Alaska Airlines and everyone did to put a $50 million maintenance facility in Anchorage, Alaska was amazing. And I think that that's a great testament to what Anchorage is doing and what their commitment to Alaska and Anchorage is, and we need to encourage that. The hangar has signs on the north and the south, of course, and the south-facing sign is not publicly accessible. I mean, you can barely see it from the runway. It's a small sign. So I don't know that it should be counted, but that's another issue. As far as criteria 3, I believe that the project sign, proposed sign benefits individual businesses only is not particularly true. It basically benefits all of Alaska, and I think it benefits the airport itself, and advertising that this is an Alaskan airport. And every visitor that leaves the state will know as they drive by that this is Alaska. I think this is also an image of aviation. Aviation is probably the most important thing going on in Alaska. As a pilot since I was 19, I can tell you that without aviation, Alaska wouldn't exist in the way that it does today. And we need to promote aviation at all levels. We are going to need it, both from the international perspective and from the internal, and I think Alaska Airlines has shown that they're not leaving Alaska behind as they go out and to the rest of the world. We think that the building, as far as criteria 5 through 8, the staff has, excuse me, I have to bring this up. Criteria 5, the variance is granted, does not change the character of the zoning district where the property is located. This variance does not change that character. And then I skipped criteria 4. Proposed signage does not adversely affect the use of adjacent property to the east. In fact, the property to the east is in perfect concurrence with the signage, Northern Air Cargo. Criteria 6, the variance does not relate to ADA. Of course, requires variance for sign locations and sign area do not affect the health and safety welfare of the people of the municipality. There is no anticipated negative health or safety concerns, and proposed sign variance is not related to the maximum sign height. This particular criteria 8 is met. So I find that all criteria 1 through 8 are met. I just want to speak really just very briefly also that a piece of artwork on the side of this building is totally within the guidelines of being able to be done here. And the idea that Alaska Airlines has decided to put a symbol of the state of Alaska on the side of this building that we can all look at and say, okay, that's a symbol for all of us, is fine with me. I think that's a perfectly good use of that huge blue wall, of which is pretty ugly right now. And I think putting, a tail of Hawaii or the other dog sled or some other type of graphic on that wall does not make a bit of sense. And certainly, we'd all be sitting here really upset, and I'm sure the community councils would as well, if that sort of thing were to occur. So I think it fits within what we accept as a state and as a city, and I think it fits within what we all would logically look at as something we would be proud of, and so I'm in favor of it. Oh, the department recommendations 1 and 2, I assume that the petitioner did not have a problem with those 2? Okay, shaking his no. So we are including department recommendations 1 and 2.
Thank you, Commissioner Winchester. Commissioner Morse, did you wish to speak?
I do. Thank you, Chair. First, I have a question for staff, and then I'd like to base my case on that. Okay. Can staff verify with the image on the screen that there would be no variance required for B and C as graphic options for the side of the building?
I'm not prepared to answer that. I really don't know.
Okay.
This is the first I've seen that, and don't usually, the planning department is usually not involved in the sign, is not involved with the sign permitting process, and so the people that make those determinations, it's not me.
Okay, thank you. I will say that I do not intend to state the motion, support the motion. I would like to share my findings now so that the rest of the commission can hear them. Is that okay? Okay, so first, note that Alaska Air has built a lot of goodwill in Alaska and that we all are a fan of the company. I think we hear a lot of collective goodwill in this room today. I do encourage artwork on the side of the building, and what my current understanding is, what our collective current understanding is that artwork that is not attached to a logo of a business would be allowed on the east side of the building, so I am encouraging the owner to continue to look at that. The artwork would require no variance. However, the current proposal, as I see it, is not art, it's marketing. It is a logo being defined as a symbol or other design adopted by an organization to identify its product. I've never once seen that image and not thought Alaska Airlines. It would be 75 feet tall, I believe. I see it as a big billboard that's attached to a building. It's as recognizable as the McDonald's arches. It is a logo in itself. So my findings would include mimicking the staff's findings that 2103-240G approval criteria 1, 2, and 3 are not met. Criteria 1 says the proposed alternative achieves the intent of the subject design standard to the same or better degree than the subject standard. That is not met because this is a painted company logo as being previously defined in my statement. Criteria 2 is the proposed alternative achieves the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan to the same or better degree than the subject standard. This is not met as the standard calls to Anchorage 2020, and the rezones and variances shall be compatible in scale with adjacent land uses and consistent with the goals and policies of 2020. I do not find that it is. And then the approval criteria 3, the proposed alternative results in benefits to the community that are equivalent or better than compliance with the subject standard. So that is not met as the proposed sign variance location and size would benefit the business and not the community as a whole, as I see it.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan.
I just want to say that I intend to support the motion, and I agree with all that Commissioner Winchester stated. Just a minor recommendation, maybe shading a little the graphic will make people happy. You will still see it, and you won't see it from far away. So maybe a change of shading. That's a recommendation.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion? So we have a motion on the floor to approve case 2018-0102, a request for variance from the code for the sign. I think we're ready to vote. Is that right? I'm ready to vote. Is that, did we lose? Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, we have one more case this evening. Thank you for your patience, by the way, Mr. Gamache, for your 5-month wait on that. Okay, so moving on to the second case on the agenda, if I can just find it here. It's case 2019-0031. Our petitioner is Ship Creek Industrial Complex. May we have the staff's presentation?
I sit here alone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The petitioner is applying for a variance from Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, Chapter 7, subsection 080E1, site perimeter landscaping requirements, to allow the use of industrial art in lieu of required visual enhancement landscaping along East Whitney Road. East Whitney Road is classified as an industrial collector by the 2014 Official Streets and Highways Plan, and as such, the petitioner is required to install L1, which stands for Visual Enhancement Landscaping, along East Whitney Road. This request is being sought because the installation of required landscaping is claimed to negatively impact the function and movement of equipment on site by the petitioner, given the site's dimensions and existing orientation. The Planning Department has evaluated the application and presents the following findings. For criteria A, the proposed alternative achieves the intent of the subject design standard to the same or better degree than the subject standard. The standard is not met. The proposed design is tailored to fit the unique industrial nature of the Ship Creek Industrial District. The installation of painted intermodal shipping containers and attached industrial metal art placed on top of an existing concrete block retaining wall will create a screening wall between East Whitney Road and the petition site. The preliminary design of the artwork gives tribute to the wildlife of the Ship Creek watershed, featuring metal silhouettes of salmon, bear, and moose. However, the placement of intermodal shipping containers along the frontage of East Whitney Road will encompass the same or less amount of space as necessary for the installation of required site perimeter landscaping. The minimum average landscape bed width for L1 visual enhancement landscaping is 8 feet. The width dimension of a standard intermodal shipping container is 8 feet 6 inches. Despite the relatively long and narrow appearance of the petition site, the parcel is approximately 4.8 acres and provides ample space to accommodate a variety of heavy industrial uses. The petitioner cites the dimensions of the parcel as impediments to the use of the site, but sufficient evidence to support this claim has not been provided. The purpose and intent of required landscaping is not only to screen site operations from the right-of-way, but to soften the streetscape, reduce stormwater runoff, control dust, preserve air and water quality, and to provide a consistent streetscape design for neighborhoods. The proposed design will provide screening from the right-of-way, but it does not meet the intent of the subject standard to the same or better degree. For criteria B, the proposed alternative achieves the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan to the same or better degree than the subject standard. The standard is met. This parcel is classified as general industrial in the 2040 Anchorage Land Use Plan map, and industrial/industrial reserve in the 2013 Government Hill Neighborhood Plan, Land Use Plan map. The granting of this variance will not change the classification of this parcel in the comprehensive plan. Additionally, this project is compliant with the following policies of the Anchorage 2020 Anchorage Bowl Comprehensive Plan, and that'd be Policy 26, Policy 83. I believe I have a typo. I have 83 mentioned twice. And criteria C, the proposed alternative results in benefits to the community that are equivalent to or better than compliance with the subject standard. The standard is not met. The proposed alternative will bring a unique alternative to a site that has long been in need of renovation. The Ship Creek Industrial District has long served various heavy industrial uses and is likely to serve in that capacity well into the future. This alternative matches the character of the district, surrounding uses, and the local wildlife who inhabit the Ship Creek watershed. However, the purpose of and intent of required landscaping is not only to screen site operations from the right-of-way, but to soften the streetscape, reduce stormwater runoff, control dust, preserve air and water quality, and to provide a consistent streetscape design for industrial, commercial, and residential neighborhoods. Inconsistency in streetscape design has the potential to negatively affect the aesthetics of the neighborhood. This inconsistency is not a benefit to the community. The proposed design will provide screening from the right-of-way, but it does not provide an alternative that is in compliance with the subject standard to the same or better degree. For criteria D, the variance, if granted, will not adversely affect the use of adjacent property as permitted under this code. The standard is met. The granting of this variance will not adversely affect the use of adjacent properties. The placement and use of the proposed industrial art will be entirely on property and will not impede or infringe upon the ability of adjacent properties to lawfully utilize their parcels as allowed by municipal code. For criteria E, the variance, if granted, does not change the character of the zoning district where the property is located, is in keeping with the intent of code, and does not permit a use not otherwise permitted in the district in which the property lies. The standard is met. The variance will not change the character of the I-2 district where this project is located, nor will it permit a use not otherwise permitted in the district. Criteria F, persons with disabilities are provided with access as required by the Americans with Disabilities Act and reasonable accommodation, and the standard is met. Granting this variance will not restrict or impede ADA accessibility, nor will it negatively affect the ability of the site to provide reasonable accommodation. Standard G, the variance, if granted, does not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the people of the municipality. The standard is met. The granting of this variance will not adversely affect the health, safety, or welfare of the municipality. Criteria H, in evaluating the request for a variance from the maximum sign height, the Urban Design Commission may consider whether there are special topographic circumstances that would result in a material impairment of visibility of the sign from the adjacent roadway, which significantly diminishes the owner's or user's ability to continue to communicate adequately and effectively with the public through the use of this sign. The standard is met, and it's just simply because this variance request does not involve a sign. And some additional considerations before I wrap up here. Because the final appearance of the metal silhouettes may differ from those shown in the submitted plans, the petitioner is requesting that the Commission delegate approval of the final design to the planning director, and that is mentioned in condition 3 on page 9 of the staff report. And in conclusion, Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, Chapter 3, subsection 240 requires that variance requests substantially meet all 8 of the design variance standards in order for a variance to be granted. The department finds that standards B, D, E, F, G, and H are substantially met, and standards A and C are not met. Therefore, the planning department recommends denial of the variance. And I just wanted to make sure the Commission was provided with some comments that were submitted after the staff packet had been finalized. So that would be supplemental packet number 1 that was distributed to Commission members prior to the start of the meeting. And that does have a comment from Parks and Recreation Department in opposition of the approval of the variance. It does have a letter from the Alaska Railroad in support of the variance, and it does have a resolution from the Government Hill Community Council, a resolution of support, rather, from the Government Hill Community Council supporting the granting of this variance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Looks like we have a question from Commissioner Morse.
Thank you. I did want to say thank you for sending these supplemental packets ahead of time. I find it a lot easier to be able to read them and review them before we get here.
Any other questions of staff? Okay. Petitioner, please come forward and state and spell your name for the record. Oh, and also, always forget, make sure to tell me if you want time for rebuttal and how much you would like. You have 10 minutes, so.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Donna Mears, M-E-A-R-S, like the middle school, but no relation. I work for the petitioner as a civil and environmental engineer. We would like to reserve 2 minutes for rebuttal. We're also here tonight with Peter Biggs from Corvus Design and my boss, Shane Duran. Thank you for taking the time to hear us tonight. It's exciting to have so much discussion about publicly accessible art in our community. It's the theme of the evening. I'd like to start out providing a little more context for this project. The Kinnick Power Plant was originally constructed in 1952. It was a coal-fired power plant converted to natural gas and then decommissioned in 1985. We have a ground lease from the Alaska Railroad, as the industrial lots in this area do. And we're bound to the north by the rail yard, and along the south edge is Whitney Road, which is primarily used as a trucking corridor because we're really close to the port, which is also good for us. This industrial building is huge. It's 34,000 square foot footprint, and it's got a 220-foot long face right on the edge of Whitney Road. The road was constructed after the building, and it's right up against the road there. The CAP has been identified in the Ship Creek Framework Plan and the Government Hill Neighborhood Plan for rehabilitation, and previous owners have had big ideas, but there have only been minor uses of this property since the plant was decommissioned. The Alaska Railroad is very happy to have CAP and adjacent yard more fully utilized and developed. They're very happy when we painted it, and we've got more to come. This is one of several projects that's returning vitality to the Ship Creek area. The railroad also appreciates the opportunity for creating more artwork, as tourism is a significant portion of their business, and the proposed installation will provide a more memorable sense of place. The opportunity to site a recycling transfer facility along the rail line is beneficial, as material handling is a big cost driver for this marginal industry. Central Recycling Services is looking forward to the opportunity to provide more material diversion for Alaska, and maximum use of this site helps move us all towards that goal. The linear layout of the site allows for good material flow, but concessions on the width are precious. This lot is particularly unique since 3 sets of rails run along the northern 70 feet of the property and directly into the building. We're also restricted with an elevation change along the property. Whitney climbs a hill, so there's a change in grade that way. And then there's also, we're bound by the elevations of the rail lines and Whitney Road. Another restriction to site development is a requirement to leave contaminated soils on site. It's a brownfields development project. The resulting retaining walls given us an opportunity to take advantage of the industrial scale of the building and play with reducing this scale through the submitted art concept, as well as tie the industrial site back to the natural features of Ship Creek across the street. The portion of the site perimeter we're requesting for variance for visual enhancement is of the wall at about 590 linear feet. But the remainder of the 1,270 feet of the perimeter of the parcel will otherwise meet code with vegetative landscaping for visual enhancement. I've been to the Government Hill Community Council, and they were really excited about the opportunity for the artwork component of this project, and so are we. We think that adding nature-inspired industrial art to our project will much better fit the scale of the wall and building and enhance the identity of Ship Creek. And Peter has some more things regarding staff.
My name is Peter Briggs, B-R-I-G-G-S. I'm a landscape architect with Corvus Design. I'm just going to get to the facts of this. This broader design variance process is a fairly new option to allow petitioners a higher level of site development flexibility that we didn't have under previous code. We understand that the cases before you did not set precedent, but the reality is that they do shape what you'll see in the future. Our goal with our variance request is to establish that our proposal meets the functional benefits functional benefits of code. And then our goal is that we make a case that this variance request meets or exceeds code as it relates to the aesthetic benefits. And we're hoping that you see the variance request as an opportunity where the benefits within a heavily developed industrial area weigh in favor of an approval. From a functional assessment point of view, this relates to the assessment of conditions A and C. Air, noise, and dust. The site is currently held to a higher standard. There is a dust and air quality control plan with Department of Health, and that is accepted by them. For stormwater, the lease agreement does not allow excavation on the site due to contaminated soils. This is why the wall is located where it is, in order to hold the fill necessary to level the site so it becomes an operable industrial site. This is also a reason that water percolation on the site is not fully desirable. The site has stormwater best management practices in place, including an oil and grit separator. The area is not serviced with stormwater infrastructure, so the site stormwater enters a vegetated swale in the adjacent DOT right-of-way. The area requested for variance is also at the crown of the property, so that defines where the drainage goes. Regarding permeability and stormwater, there is a 3-foot vegetated area on property at the base of the wall. That equals about 2,000 square feet. And it's expanded since what has been shown on the packet and plan in your packet, adding additional space on the east of the site where there is some stormwater concentration to the extent of 1,125 square feet. So what that takes us up to is about a 2/3 equivalent to the amount of softscape there would be within the landscape, 8 feet if it was included. Beyond functional benefits, Those points illustrate the fact that the functional benefits of code could be assessed as being met on the site. The aesthetic assessment is something completely different. And I know that we're down to, what does that say? 140? Okay. From a point for rebuttal, the 2 minutes is really if we wish to speak to anyone from a public hearing point of view as well, right? So we may use our 2 minutes. Beyond the functional benefits being met, aesthetic is the key discussion of why we're here this evening. To reiterate, the functional benefits that relate to noise, air quality, and stormwater, the L1 landscape, are met through other means or may be undesirable as it relates to percolation through a contaminated site. This proposal seeks to meet the aesthetic benefits of L1 landscape through non-vegetative means. Mainly, this relates to scale. The site exists in a heavy industrial area and is directly adjacent to one of the largest buildings in the area. Development of the road resulted in the road right-of-way lot line at the face of this building. This establishes an extreme scale at the property line. A significant portion of traffic on East Whitney Road is heavy truck, with a narrow road width, no significant shoulders, and the speed and size of traffic. This reinforces a vehicular scale rather than a pedestrian scale. The retaining wall required to allow the site to operate effectively as an I2 use is up to 8 feet tall. The person in the orange vest there is Donna, who's about 5.5 feet tall. So you can see there's some scale there. The importance of this wall is that industrial land in Anchorage is important, and this site has been underutilized until now. Code requires an 8-foot height fence at the perimeter of solid waste and or recycling transfer facility uses, and this gives an effective 16-foot height for this facility within 0 to 8 feet of the property line. Can we use some of our...
Commissioner, oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Just keep
yes,
going.
Please go. Please
I don't really have that
Please
much more.
continue.
It's lots of bullet points.
Yeah. Please.
As the photo illustrates, the scale of the wall is dwarfed by the building. So the wall is 16 feet, the building is about 70 feet tall. The intent then, with these conditions, the petitioner seeks the opportunity to use this perimeter condition as a canvas that allows a scale of artwork that is in keeping with the area's reality of industrial use and scale. For artwork scale, this is in your packets. For artwork scale, the fish that are shown on here are between 2 feet and 4 feet in width and 6 feet and 10 feet long. These are large fish. With a 587-foot length of wall and a speed limit of 30 miles per hour, someone driving along the face of the wall takes 13 seconds to move past the wall. The artwork is intended to be of a scale that has two purposes. It provides long view interest. There are views of this from further away. And it's of a scale that relates to the road, and being of a large size, it's visible without being distracting to traffic. When you look at this view, the size of the artwork ensures that you get the idea of what it is as you drive by. It's not something you necessarily need to look at to see smaller objects, so it's meant to be larger than life. The initial value of the artwork as well is expected to have a higher cost than the associated L1 landscape within this area. The artwork process, as noted in some of the staff packet, art is subjective. For the concept as shown, we have letters of support from the Community Council and the Railroad. While we do not believe that the concept will evolve that much, our application states that the final design is desired to be reviewed with the director, as Ryan pointed out. So our request. We see the design variance request as a way to discuss opportunities with the municipality. If we have made a reasonable case that functional benefits are provided, then we are assessing aesthetic benefits with you.
Okay, I guess we've hit the 10 minutes. Can we get a question for it? Thank you. Commissioner Morse.
Could the petitioner please continue?
Sorry, apologies for going on, but we're almost there. We see the design variance request as a way to discuss opportunities with the municipality. If we have made a reasonable case that the functional benefits are provided, then we are assessing aesthetic benefits. Approval of this design variance provides an operational benefit to the petitioner. We hope that you see their interest in artwork is a way for them to discuss a different aesthetic approach, one that may enhance a community sense of place more than plantings might achieve. We recognize the importance of landscaping standards to the city, and much of this parcel meets those standards. The western half is being built to code. We hope that you see this as a unique opportunity that goes beyond standard site requirements and engage with us as to how this could provide community benefit that meets or exceeds the intent of code. This is not the kind of case that you see often, or maybe it is after tonight. And your assessment enhances code as it relates to shaping our community. We look forward to this dialogue.
Thank you. Looks like we have some questions. Commissioner Morse?
Thank you. I wasn't sure if I had to ask again because I did ask him to continue speaking. Could you back up a little toward the requirements for the brownfield site and the lack of wanting permeability on the site? I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
The lease conditions are that the site should not have excavated material removed from it. As an industrial site, it's for this area at least, the lease desires that it remains in situ. The location of the wall was basically set at a level on the site that would leave the existing slope behind it. In order to be an operational industrial site, a level site is of benefit, and that's the reason they wound up filling it out to get as wide a usable area as possible. And even still right now, the train tracks comes down to a lower level, comes down the wall, so it's still not optimized for full level access to the railroad. There are quite a few different heights happening in this area. So from a site stormwater point of view, with the intent of code being the landscaping can accept stormwater and keep it out of stormwater systems, there's a mixed bag on this one. It's almost better to get your water off the site and into a oil grit separator and then convey it out of the site versus allowing it to percolate down. That's why the 3 feet that's within the swale is merited, because that area has traditionally been swale or drainage. The area at the corner of the site where we want to put a bit more, percolation could still move materials through the soils. So there's a pro and con in an industrial area as to whether you do want stormwater to be dealt with on site or not. Does that answer your question?
Could you demonstrate on the site plan where the expected drainage is to happen?
Currently on the site, the stormwater.
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll need you to speak into the microphone if you can.
Carry it with you. Yeah.
Over here.
Thank you.
Apologies. Currently on the site, the water for most of this area comes through an oil grit separator and then comes out through a piped outlet about in this location. Is that correct?
So through the wall into the...
Yeah, so 8 feet down on the wall, there's probably a 16-inch corrugated plastic culvert that takes it from the oil grit separator and puts it into the swale.
Okay. Okay. Secondarily, you mentioned some sort of opaque barrier, another 8-foot tall barrier that would be necessary on site. Can you describe that a bit further?
Yes. So the use for the site is a recycling facility. So it's also subject to AMC 2105-060E9, solid waste and or recycling transfer facility. Within that section, the additional requirement above the landscaping is it has an 8-foot site obscuring fence. It does not state where that needs to happen, but it can be assumed that it's between the activity that is being screened and the property line. Currently on the site, that is the intent of the use of the cargo containers, and that's has been a part of other permitting activities to allow that as a use for that screening structure.
Thank you. Lastly, I think if the connexes are not a sufficient barrier per this commission today, is there a cost implication that may, how does the cost implication of having to remove the connexes and install the site obscuring barrier and the L1 landscaping, how does that impact the project in a whole?
So for clarity, we're not in front of the commission as it relates to the site obscuring fence as has been approved through other processes.
Right. I'm asking if this is not approved, this variance today, and you are asked to do the landscaping for this 600 feet, is that what you said?
Approximately 600 feet, yes.
How does that affect the project?
If the variance is not approved, it would need to have the removal of the Connex containers to have 8-foot landscape basically set at the back of the top of the wall.
Okay.
Or on top of the containers, or another, a code, something that would be consistent with code interpretation.
Okay.
Commissioner Morris, do you mind if I expand on your first question?
I'd come up, say your name.
Is that on the Brownfield site question?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you state your name, please?
Shane Duran, D-U-R-A-N-D. So the railroad area, the industrial area, the pond across the street was the former cooling pond for the power plant, and there's been contamination shown in the pond and contamination on the site and the surrounding properties. Our recycling operation, where we're handling recyclable metals and materials in and out of trucks to train cars and transferring them out of state, there is a risk of things coming out of a squished appliance or whatever in leaking out. If we have any green areas on site where that could run into, we run the risk of ourselves further contaminating the site. By having it all hardscaped and collecting all that water into the oil grit separator, we reduce our potential future liability of controlling that. And, and to further expand on the question on moving the containers back, that's kind of what got me started in this process. Is you have this wall, and now we're required to put landscaping on the top of the wall, and you drive by, you're not going to see the landscaping on the top of the wall, and then we need to put an 8-foot fence up. So we had started down the path of doing a chain link fence, but when you look at the large equipment that we run in here, the giant material handlers and stuff, the wheels are 5-6 foot tall. If one of those were to roll away or to have an incident, it just folds over an 8-foot chain link fence, and it's going to end up out here on the wall. So we have to have a fairly significant wall to keep the equipment on the top. So that's part of having these containers up there and having them anchored is to further is a safety barrier as well.
I appreciate the insight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Winchester.
So to clarify, that was part of my question, is the containers are actually a safety barrier for your operation?
Yes, sir. It's safety and storage because we're handling recyclables. We have copper and things like that, having places where that can be locked up where people can't just climb a fence or cut through a fence and steal goods.
So they're permanent storage, but they also provide safety barrier and other uses?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The other question I had, what was it? Okay, so is this lot is part of the power plant project? Is it?
Yes, sir. Our lease lot is about 8.5 acres, and now we've also have 2 adjoining properties that we have separate leases on for the whole facility. So as we're renovating,
it goes from the parcel that the project is. Sorry. the parcel that the project is on is there.
Yeah.
And this is the power plant
So,
structure right here.
Right.
Please speak into the mic. Right.
There we go. This would be the power plant structure. Here's the dam at Ship Creek. The little park that Parks and Rec referred to is right here. So when the Parks and Rec memo saying that this was an issue with the park and the parking area, we do still have landscaping adjoining the building that meets the requirements. We're only asking for the variance down here at the wall at the actual recycle transfer facility.
So just as a point of history, my grandfather actually poured the concrete in that power plant back in the 1940s and 50s, so it's very interesting. It's still there.
My grandfather poured the concrete at the power plant at Fort Rich, which was built the following year as this one.
Very neat. Incredible. Well, we're still all here. And trying to resolve even bigger issues. I appreciate the oil and water separation issue and the contaminated site issues that are down there in the railroad yards, and I think you've articulated that particularly well. And I guess the issue I still question is trying to even do anything like the landscaping that you're talking about that would allow for that sort of contamination to get even worse. I mean, you said that's kind of a toss-up. The large landscape area in the corner. I mean, it seems like in an industrial site like this, you just want to seal it off, especially with everything that you have below it.
we'd love to seal it all off, but we're trying to provide, as much as we can here. And that piece at the end of the wall, the oil water separator and everything drains away from it, and it isn't an area of operation.
Okay. All right. Okay, so those are important points. So you're basically draining away from that area, and it's not a major area of operation?
Correct. Right now in this yard, all of the drainage comes to the center.
Okay.
There's a structure here. Everything drains to this structure, goes down. The oil water separator is at this end of the facility. So everything drains into a series of catch basins along here and will eventually drain through this oil water separator here and leave. And this all drains back into it. Currently, there's pavement. At least half of that is currently pavement.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that you're trying to do some things, and I think, you've done everything you can with this. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Sullivan?
So with the building so close to the road, there's a lot of pedestrians there. What happens in the winter with the snow?
There's no pedestrians on the north side of the road. There's no sidewalks provided or anything. They're all on to the south side of the road. In the winter, the snow just gets blown up against the bottom of
like it's shown in your picture? Like it piles against the wall?
Yeah, it just goes along the bottom of the wall here. Snow on site we'll have to collect and haul off. We're not going to have a large...
So if you were to put landscape, it will kind of get messed up by all the piling of the snow?
Yeah. If it was at the bottom of the... Yeah.
Okay, looks like we have something that staff would like to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This information was missing out of the application as far as the amount of impervious surfaces on site. Just a question for the petitioner. Could you state the percentage of impervious and pervious surfaces on site?
We didn't do a total calculation for that. The calculations that I had done were relative to the 580 feet long of 8-foot vegetation that would be required by code compared to what we are saying that we will provide. So we don't have an overall permeability percentage at hand, but that's something we can follow up with if desired.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Baxley?
Hi, I'd like to thank you for coming out here tonight and presenting your project. I really appreciate it. A couple of my questions were already answered before. I was wondering, so you are going to plant trees on the west side in front of the building, between the building and the road?
Not between the building and the road because the building is on the right-of-way. There's no space on our property.
Okay.
There's trees on the west side of the building. Show that.
Microphone.
On the west side of the building, there is the required landscape provided over here.
Okay.
The road right-of-way is right against the face of the building. Originally, when the building was built, this was a parking lot as part of the building, and when Whitney Road was done, they took all that parking and put the road right up to the face of the building.
Okay. So you answered my question as far as why you didn't choose landscaping. I'm really torn because I like landscaping and I think it's good for the environment and it's good for the air and it does reduce dust. And but I also see the benefit of having a wall and for safety and your large equipment, but also I think to keep the public out. That would probably be another good reason to have a wall. I did do a site visit yesterday because I was so interested in the site, and I did notice the culvert there. So I was wondering what that was, and you answered my question there too. I noticed on the outlet side of the culvert, there's a little bit of erosion in the ditch. Is there any way that you guys could do some type of seeding or mulching or stabilization for that?
As a part of the project for the landscape on this, it would involve reseeding that with a municipality type B seed mix, which is it's a no-mow mix, so it's more of a natural grass mix.
Okay. And I was wondering, if you happen to have graffiti happen on the wall, what would you guys do to take care of it?
We'll have to microphone. We'll have to remove it. Like we have 2 other facilities, and then we've already experienced that on the building on a unfortunately regular basis. So we either paint over it gray or we remove it. The art would probably be coated with some sort of a clear coat, kind of anti-vandalism coating, so to make it easier, unlike the concrete, which is better to remove it from.
Okay. And I think that concludes my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner McKee.
So I have a question, and you may have already have answered this, but so the green connexes are not fixed to the wall because you're saying they're being used for storage, so are they're taken down, filled, and then put back, or so that was are they fixed or not fixed?
They will be, if this is approved, they'll be affixed to the top of the wall, and they're going to be positioned in such a way that there's openings between them, so the doors will still open on them, and then in between we'll use pieces of container skin to make it look like a continuous container wall. So the doors will still open, and we can put materials in and out of them and keep them fixed.
Okay.
It would also, without having landscaping on top of the containers or between them, it would also allow us to place containers on and off the top and stack them up higher as needed.
Okay. And then my other question was the metal cutout animal shapes, they're painted. So that was another one of my questions, was to what type of maintenance you're going to do, because we all know that eventually the paint's going to get chipped and it's going to look degraded. And
we were discussing using Cor-Ten and then either clear coating the Cor-Ten or having it in just a kind of a solid color. We've had many discussions about making public art and painting different ones and doing different things, but I think we've kind of settled on just keeping them as, a solid color.
Because the Cor-Ten patina's out and it turns red. And
yeah, and for anybody that is not familiar, the Cor-Ten is a type of steel that has a mix within it that rusts to a point, but then basically self-seals. So would look like rusty steel if that was the option. And I think that when it comes to the surface treatment or the types of metals, that was the intent with making sure that the director or staff are comfortable with our decisions, and then they could make a decision at any point if they felt that changes needed to go back to Urban Design Commission or whether it was within their purview to approve.
Okay. So not painted. They'll be patinaed or this Cor-Ten or something. Okay. Okay. I grew up my father was a heavy-duty diesel mechanic at Terex Evans Engines, which is just down the street. My little sister and I used to play in what you guys are calling the contaminated site. We called it the Beaver Pond. So I appreciate the effort to do something that's aesthetically appealing and, prevents people, because people do park all along this area when the fish are in and walk around. And so providing a barrier of some sort is a good idea.
And unfortunately, in this area, those little areas of trees and landscaping become areas for people to camp and do other things, which is difficult around our site.
Thank you.
Commissioner Winchester.
Yeah, I likewise, I just really want to commend you. You've done a tremendous amount of work here to evaluate this particular unique site in our Anchorage area and come up with a solution that really works with multiple challenges, both the landscaping issue being one, but also grading and artistic and then functionality when it comes to your particular needs. So I think we need to really thank you very much, because this is a lot of work you've put forward here. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no other questions? Okay, we will now open the hearing to public testimony. I see no one here to testify. And we are out of rebuttal time. So if there are no more questions for staff or the petitioner, then we need to go ahead and make a motion. I have a motion from Commissioner Morse and a second from Commissioner Winchester. Commissioner Morse, could you please state your motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to approve the variance for case number 2019-0031, the variance from AMC 21.07.080E.1, site perimeter landscaping requirements to allow for the use of industrial art in lieu of required visual enhancement landscaping along East Whitney Road. Would you like my findings additionally?
Please.
All right. So going through the requirements and specifically the approval criteria, today I heard enough to be convinced that the petitioner substantially meets all approval criteria. So starting with 2103-240G, letter A, the proposed alternative achieves the intent of the subject design standard to the same or better degree than the subject design standard. This is met by a complex mix of being a brownfield site, needing to provide safety to the public as well as security to the business. So managing all of those items, the petitioner has come up with a clever idea of using a industrial material that would normally be found on site and decorating with an Alaskan motif, a somewhat overbearing pedestrian scale project, an 8-foot wall and a 16-foot fence is now decorated to please the vehicular traffic and not encourage the pedestrian traffic. I think that's all I'll put on A. B, the proposed alternative achieves the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan to the same or better degree than the subject standard. This being a general industrial site, we'll have to speak to the comprehensive plan. Again, I think the clever solution to a large design problem of managing the people that frequent these industrial sites, security, safety, vehicle safety, are all playing a part in why we need a unique solution to this. So if we discuss policy 26 in Anchorage 2020, the key industrial lands shall be preserved for industrial purposes. This is being used for an industrial purpose. Policy 83, the municipality shall support and encourage recycling and resource recovery. Obviously, that's what this site is going to be used for, and they're doing their best to keep any further contamination out of the ground. Policy 83, provide opportunities for integrating arts and culture in developments throughout the community. I think the petitioner has presented a great solution to breaking down such a large-scale industrial site to be a bit more enjoyable to drive past. So I guess C, standard C, is the proposed alternative results and benefits to the community that are equivalent to or better than compliance with the subject standard. Staff said that this one was not met. However, I think that this is a community benefit. One, keeping the contaminated soils from infiltrating further down, being so close to a watershed where people get salmon that they eat. To me, it's a community benefit to not be further polluting that waterway. So the petitioner has already discussed that, and the drainage that they've shown on site thus far will be doing its best to minimize any contamination. Letter D, the variance if granted will not adversely affect the use of adjacent property as permitted under this code. That standard was met and agreed per staff findings. The granting of this variance will not adversely affect the use of adjacent properties. The placement and use of the proposed industrial art will be on property and not impede or infringe upon the ability of adjacent properties to use their parcels. Letter E, the variance if granted does not change the character of the zoning district where the property is located, is in keeping with the intent of the code, and does not permit a use not otherwise permitted in the district which the property lies. That standard is met. It is an I2 function on an I2 lot. Letter F, persons with disabilities are reasonably accommodated. This does not impede any ADA accessibility. Letter G, the variance if granted does not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the people of the municipality. That standard is met, and I would say even exceeded, as it is obvious that the petitioner has considered the safety and welfare of the pedestrians and vehicular traffic driving by this difficult site in their design. Letter H, in evaluating the request for variance from the maximum sign height, the Urban Design Commission may consider whether there are special topographic circumstances that would result in roadway which would result in material impairment of visibility of the sign from the adjacent roadway, which significantly diminishes the owner's or user's ability to continue to communicate adequately and effectively with the public through the use of the sign. It is a non-applicable item, as there's no sign involved in this discussion. So with finding all of the standards met, I recommend we take department recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'd also like to add that the site plan that was presented tonight was not in the packet. So I don't know how that's a finding. But if the finding is that they include the site plan as distributed or as displayed today, not the site plan that was distributed in our packet, that would be my findings. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Winchester, would you like to speak to your second?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, just a couple of items to add. First of all, I really would hope that maybe the designers of this project would see if they could talk to DOT and work with some of our other roads across the state and Anchorage that we are always dealing with, and often are confronted with situations like this with very much less aesthetic and or quality of design appropriateness presented to us. And so just kind of throwing that out there because I'm really tired of seeing those kinds of presentations, and this one is wonderful. I would also state that I am going to support the motion. I do believe that the purpose and intent of required landscaping, which is to screen and do those sorts of things, I do believe you've done an amazing job to do that on this kind of an industrial site, and that really is the big key. This is an industrial site. It is right on the railroad. It is taking care of all of those things that get things in and out of Anchorage, and as a recycling operation, it's just a wonderful idea. We should be supporting that, and the fact that you've put that forward as well. So I do believe that you're taking into account how to deal with the streetscape, storm runoff, dust control, preserve air and water quality, all of those things as part of your design, even though it isn't landscaping, quote unquote. And I am a fan of landscaping, absolutely. But in this particular situation, we have a unique, the way the road was built after the fact, after the railroad, after the building, you know, it's a history that we just have to deal with as a community. And every piece of our regulation doesn't always deal with each site perfectly. You know, if this was a a totally new site, we'd be asking for other things, but we're dealing with existing conditions. So I also wanted to mention that I think that, you know, you're really taking into account the safety issues, and not just the safety for any pedestrian, but even the homeless folks that move through that particular area of town a lot. You're dealing with actually protecting those people from dealing with situations that would make it unsafe for them as well. So I think you've done a great job. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion from the commission? Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and just state the motion so that everybody's aware. For case number 2019-0031, we have a motion to approve the variance from AMC 2107-080E1 site perimeter landscaping requirements to allow for the use of industrial art in lieu of required visual enhancement and landscaping along East Whitney Road at the Ship Creek Crossing Subdivision Lot 4, 229 East Whitney Road. Can we get a... Oh, and I'm sorry, it also is approved subject to department recommendations and conditions 1 through 4. Okay, I think now we can vote. Motion passes. Thank you. I'm looking to see if we have anything else on the agenda. Are there any, anybody want to say anything, any committee or commission comments?
I would like to say something.
Okay.
This is another, issue, signage codes, but we are tired. We should talk another day because it's very, it's like signage codes can prevent creativity. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing that the design standards do. So
similar to the architectural menu options.
I have always questioned.
And I think that is something that I'm not sure how to address that, but it's something that we find difficult to agree on when we're here in the same room. And I think it was said to us by previous petitioner that we all know very well that a lot of developers don't develop because they don't want to go through the process of all those menu options. Mm-hmm. Or they just put the facade. Everything looks the same. Once they find a menu option that works, everything looks the same.
Yeah, if you want to read the design standards and you're building downtown.
This is why I'm a dirt mover. Civil engineer, to ground down. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I wanted to say welcome to all the new commissioners. I wasn't here last month, but it's nice to see new faces up here. Yeah. I'm Melissa. I'm an architect.
Yeah, and you guys came pretty strong. Some of us do not talk until the third meeting.
Or the 10th meeting. Or until they became chair. Okay, seriously though, are we good? Do we have anything else we want to discuss, or can we adjourn? Motion to adjourn? This used to be my job. Okay, we have a motion to adjourn from Commissioner Winchester and a second from Commissioner Morse.